So, Donna, I can't tell you how often I think about you, and in my mind, I have all of these conversations, and then finally, it got to the point where we got to touch base again. There's so much going on, and I'm sure you are like in the throes of all of this. So, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time again to meet with me on the podcast. Your podcast is very popular, by the way. So, there's more people, I guess, than we imagine that are interested in this subject. So, how are you doing?
Well, I was so happy to see your name pop up. I thought, oh my gosh, she's doing a wellness check to make sure we're still alive and thriving. And so good news is that it is, and I think it's just this constant building up the data. And as we've been doing this, being recognized more for the validity of the science, and there's just many exciting things that have been happening. The introduction of these cells in various DoD applications, primarily in brain injury and some acute injuries as well. So we'll be seeing these cells used in a lot of different ways.
So, for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, we should actually say that we're talking about stem cells. And Donna, maybe you can just give us a little background on your history and what you were doing and kind of the recognition you guys have gotten with all your research.
Sure. So the cells that we specifically work with are called mesenchymal stem cells. And these are cells that our body naturally has. So practically in every tissue of our bodies, we have these cells. The only problem is that we lose them as we age. And their primary function in our tissues are to help keep our tissues healthy. And they are constantly working at regenerating so they can actually transform into various tissue types. But they are also well known in their ability to regulate the immune system and strengthen the immune system when needed, and autoimmune diseases sometimes attenuate it. So they have so many different functions. Again, as we age, and if we have disease, our cells are working overtime. And so all the cells that are in our bodies are deployed or used up. And so if we were to take a common source for stem cells, like if I were to take bone marrow from somebody who's much older or who's been sick for a long time, you'll notice that a lot of the stem cells, the innate stem cells in that bone marrow, are gone. They're depleted. So for a long time, we've thought, well, if these cells are so wonderful, is there any way that we can replace them? Is there any way that we can, do this? And I mean, people have thought of all kinds of things, like perhaps there are vitamins that we can take that can increase the stem cells in our own bodies. But as you've probably heard of stem cells, people have thought about taking stem cells from embryos and taking those and putting them in. So looking for foreign sources of cells. But it turns out that if our bodies have some cells, I mean, few and far between, but if our bodies have some, then perhaps we can take them out of the body into the lab and culture them. So just increase the number. Cell culture is an expansion, just increasing the number of cells. Now, this sounds very easy, and it is primitive technology. If you think about cell culture, it's been happening ever since the days we've been growing mold in our own kitchens. So it's not rocket science, but stem cells like our bodies in terms of the environment, and they don't like the lab setting. In other words, they are very sensitive and very finicky to an environment outside of the body. So it's been really challenging to try and keep stem cells exactly the same way as they were in your body. This is very important if you're trying to reintroduce cells. Anytime you're thinking about reintroducing any kind of medicine into your body, you want to make sure that it can integrate safely. And so the only way we know that these cells are going to be safe going back into your body is that they behave and look exactly like the cells that came out of your body. And so that was our goal when we first started Hope Biosciences now 9 years ago. It was, let's not think about disease. Let's first figure out, is there a way in the lab to create a repository of cells, one's own repository of cells that they can use for the rest of their lives? Whenever cells are needed, grab cells from the bank and deliver it to a patient. Is there any way that we can accomplish this? And if we can, then it's worth talking about disease. So disease is very complicated. And as you know, I think the people think that, developing a new cure for something is so hard because, we have to find new compounds. But most of the time, it's the lack of understanding in the disease itself. And sometimes we may never figure out why these diseases start in the first place. I mean, if we knew those things, we wouldn't have disease, right? So disease itself is very, very complicated. And so with that, we're trying to figure out how can the cells impact any disease mechanism? And rather than look at diseases individually, which unfortunately we have to do with the FDA and kind of the way things are set up in America, but we're sort of at the tip of the iceberg, I say, just kind of seeing how the cells can impact pretty much any disease process.
So the U.S. seems to have very strict regulations about stem cells, where they come from, and how they're used. But we hear of all these places that more experimental use of stem cells is happening. But again, we don't know how regulated it is. So there's always that question. So I think the question I have is, if your research is investigating how we can sort of keep these cells energized to be regenerating, how long into the future do you see that actually being implemented as a solution to extending life or longevity, health, wellness, or just, and not with disease, curing disease yet, but just sort of maintaining a good immune system, preventing, I guess, inflammation, or all of these things that kind of ages the body?
So I think, with any introduction of a new technology like this one, it will always start with the sickest, right? You start with the challenging diseases that don't have any solutions. Why? Because largely regulators also have the challenge of trying to figure out solutions for that. And so there's more openness, if you will, to study those kinds of conditions. And then once we start understanding, like for instance, in autoimmune diseases, we understand that, if these cells can regulate an immune system, regulate the inflammation in the body, then perhaps they would be good for prevention, like in the COVID days. So back when before there was even the talk of a vaccine, we were the first to introduce ourselves to ourselves, actually, so that we could come to work and we could come to work safely and strengthen our immune system so that we could prevent the symptoms of COVID. And I think, so you start with the disease and the hard stuff, and then you sort of work your way backwards once you start understanding how these cells are working. Now, longevity and wellness is actually just treating things really early. That's actually what it is, because aging itself is the deterioration of everything, right? And so when you do biodistribution. That's the study of looking at where do cells go in the body when you infuse them. We know that in just what we call like healthy aging animals, the cells evenly distribute. That means that our organs are actually degenerating, and that's where the body sees a priority. When you have a disease, they localize primarily in that, specific areas. But in healthy but aging, you see that even distribution. And so I do think that, there's been talk of using these cells as a diagnostic. What if we are able to track where the cells go in the body? Then we can maybe see that they're in early stage cancer. I mean, the mind just goes into all these areas.
It's amazing.
The sky is the limit when it comes to understanding, because these cells are naturally drawn to areas of injury that need repair. So it's a very powerful tool that I think, if scaled, will be used in all these different areas, even like organ regeneration, all of these things.
It's unbelievable. It's just I want to just go back a little bit to COVID. So you guys, so you could go back to work. Actually, what did you do? You took your cells and gave them back to you again, or what did you do?
I mean, at that time, it was, we started our nonprofit research foundation. So we have a research site here that actually can host patients and see them here. And we opened the doors March 5th, 2020. And I think that was the day the world shut down. All of that happened at the same time. And we had just received our first FDA authorization in Alzheimer's research. But then said, no clinical research is going to happen because all the sites shut down too, right? Nobody is seeing clinical research. And so we're stuck. It's like, okay, what do we do now? We just started. And with anything new, the chance of survival is slim to none to start with. Environment. We didn't think we would get anywhere. And so when we heard, because COVID was still in China at the time, it wasn't here yet. It was still, lingering overseas. And so as we're watching this coming, we proposed to FDA. We think we're necessary people to come to work because we think that these trials that we're doing right now are very important for mankind. And we don't have, if we're going to stay home indefinitely, all of this stuff gets on the back burner and we're never going to get anywhere. So we really need to get to work. And we have a tank full of people who have banked their cells. Right. And banking basically involves giving us a tablespoon of your fat, and we will isolate the stem cells and culture them and bank them for you. So we have a tank full of people that have banked. And so we asked FDA for permission to go ahead and give everybody in that tank 5 doses. So 1 billion cells, 200 million cells each. So 1 billion cells to protect us against COVID. And so there were certain things we had to measure. We had to measure if anyone got COVID, if anyone got sick. But that was basically it. That's all we had because they didn't know anything about COVID either. So we executed the trial. We all did well. No one got sick. And we were in the COVID wards at some point. So we were amongst the sickest of the sick. And we were all protected. And so
just so I understand so you had the cells already harvested, and now you regenerated them to multiply them?
Yeah, the beauty of the technology is once we take that tablespoon of fat and we isolate just the MSCs, the healthy MSCs, we then culture them. It takes us about 2 months, 6 to 8 weeks to culture these cells in enough of a population that it'll survive a deep freeze. So anytime you deep freeze cells, and this is to preserve them for long-term use,
right?
There are many that will die through the freezing process and also the subsequent thawing process. But what we understood was, depending on the disease and the complexity of whatever disease you're treating, you're going to need multiple infusions. This isn't like a one-off treatment. The only case that I can think of where there's a possibility for a one-off is like a bad knee, you have like, I don't know, stage 3 osteoarthritis,
Right. Right.
You could maybe fix that with a single injection. But most often, like Alzheimer's, you would need repeatable treatment. So the way that technology works is once we've cultured that many and stored them, anytime you need them in the future, we take out a small vial from the tank and then we reculture the cells so that when we harvest them after 10 to 14 days, that is fresh. That gets on a FedEx truck delivered to the physician that will be giving the treatment, and it is administered the very next day. So that's we can actually produce over 1,000 treatments from a single tablespoon of fat.
So my question is, I think everybody listening to this wants to contribute their single tablespoon of fat so that they have the cells available if they need them. But the question is this available for people to actually use for health and well-being?
So it is cell banking, your ability to bank your own stem cells, just like newborn babies that are banking cells or parents are banking cells on behalf of their newborns. This is all commercially available. But your question is the right question to be asking. How can I use these cells? It's one thing to bank them, and banking, anytime you're thinking about stem cell banking, you should be banking for use. It's like putting your money in the bank. You don't want to put your money in just to store it. You want to use it. And for a long time, we thought, well, how would people use these cells? So at Hope Bio, we have different avenues for people to be able to access cells. So access has to fall in under some FDA program, FDA regulated program.
Right.
Most often a clinical trial. So if we have a clinical trial for multiple sclerosis and you qualify for that trial and it's using your own cells, then we'll draw the cells from your bank. Expanded access is another avenue, which is essentially a clinical trial, a customized clinical trial for a specific population or a patient that would not qualify for a clinical trial. And now there is also the Right to Try program, which we started in 2022. And that program allows for patients who have exhausted all other options, available options, and does not qualify for a trial, and they have a life-threatening disease. They can, as certified by their physician, they can apply for access through the Right to Try program. So those are the avenues. And I will add, in the event of emergency. So if you have something catastrophic happen, we can request permission for that. And that actually is a very quick process. We can do that and work with your health provider to get those cells to you. Yeah.
And so to date, is there any way that you can bank cells for use to keep your immune system, keep your healthy state intact, like in a preventative sort of more proactive approach to health?
So not now. When we have a trial for that, which
you will call me.
Yes, yes, for precisely that. Yes, Norma, the limitation in any of these trials is not so much because we have the medicine, right? We have that ready to go, and we have a great facility to make all that. The limitation is really in the design of a trial. Like, what can we measure effectively to prove that your immune system is stronger? Right now, the only way to do this is to kind of measure, okay, how many days does Norma go without a cold? Or how many days does she go on without this specific kind of infection? And in the COVID era, we learned the hard way that even if you don't get sick, you can't prove that it wasn't the cells. You still run into this issue. So it can be highly effective, but you have no way to prove it. So I see that prevention trials, or wellness or preventative trials are very tricky because of the lack of validated biomarkers, any kind of biomarkers to prove that these cells are doing what we say they're doing.
So, for instance, I'm at Atria. I'm wanting to try one of these diabetes type, for longevity, and so I tried metformin, and I lost too much weight and muscle and all of that. So we're going to try something different. And what they want to do is do a whole bunch of blood tests and check fat muscle ratio to then see when I take it, what is that? So now going back to what you do, is it possible through blood tests like that and measuring where you are, what's your baseline, and then what happens when you do this stem cell treatment, if it is, what would you call it? Therapy? Stem cell therapy?
That's what it's called right now.
Yeah.
That it is a therapy. Yeah.
And so I'm sure there's some way to just see in that way too, that since so many other things are looked at and compared to a baseline, and then what happens when you do these things that are different. I just want to say I'm volunteering.
Yes, and you're precisely right. But that would require, to see a baseline change, that would require that your baseline is abnormal to begin with. You see, in prevention, your baselines are typically normal, right? And so what you're looking for is actually an optimization.
Yeah.
But if there is something abnormal, we can certainly look at that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think everybody has some little thing. I mean, just, there's I started taking statin drugs, and I hate the idea of taking any kind of drugs. And so my question is, do I need to take them? Why would I take them? And if I could do something else to replace the statins, I would prefer to do that, as long as all my blood vessels. So to me, I'd be happy to check that box with it. So I feel as though, from a not unhealthy, but just from a perspective of preventative or looking at best practices, I'm very excited about what you do and how that could change the way the population deals with medicine, and which is why you do what you do. It's amazing. So I have another a question about stem cells. So I decided to, I'm going to be 80 this year. And I thought, I wonder if I should get a facelift. So I decided to, and I don't do anything. I don't have Botox, filler, nothing, right? So I thought I need to do some research to see what goes on in this world. And so I'm doing extensive research. I've met with surgeons who do, the full thing. I've met with all different kinds of people that do different things. And stem cells came up. And so I'm curious about your thoughts about some of the information. So one technique is obviously, as you said, to take the fat from your body, and then there's stem cells in there. And what they would do is they would use twilight sort of anesthesia, and they would zhuzh up I don't know what they do with it, but they would do something with the fat and the stem cells. And then they would do this, the microneedling and some other things to sort of get the skin, I guess, irritated so that it can get helped with stem cells. And then they would carefully inject back the stem cells into your face. And from what I understand, then the stem cells would start to kind of fix the irritation and all of that, the result, I guess, of all the needles going into your face. And so I thought, well, this is fascinating because your face isn't getting cut and it's from your own body. And that's a very interesting concept. And I thought, Donna, where is Donna? So what are your thoughts about that? Have you heard about that?
So first off, the precursor to all of this was back in the day, plastic surgeons, they call fat grafting. They take fat from your, hips or butt, wherever, and then put it into the face, right? And that would plump up. But one thing you would notice is that it was transient because the fat wouldn't stay there, and it would dissipate over time. But what they did notice is that fat transfer actually helped, especially if there was some scarring or something, or a cut incision happened, then it would heal a lot faster. And so that fat transfer, because the fat is such a robust source of stem cells, there is some degree of a stem cell transplant that's happening. It's actually one of the loopholes in the regulations as to why physicians are able to do this, because in plastic surgery, that's happening naturally all the time. And you can't argue that that's not a stem cell transplant. However, there are techniques now where they, like you say, they are isolating more of the cell population, because when you transfer the fat, if you also inject a robust population of cells, that those cells will keep the fat intact because it'll rebuild the connections and the infrastructure for that to stay where it is. And the exterior of the skin, and doing all that you do on the exterior of the skin, is just to improve the surface of the skin. It's not, what's happening deep down.
Okay.
The deep down is really the injections that are occurring. And yes, it certainly helps. I mean, there are plenty of studies that show what happens to the skin and the rebuilding of the collagen networks and everything that's happening underneath. And we've studied a lot in burns and wounds, and we understand that these cells are very powerful in doing that. Again, it's the numbers. These aren't purified cells in known numbers. And so it's hard to quantify exactly how many you're getting, and so what the benefit will be. But it's certainly a more non-invasive, natural way of approaching that. But I think we can all say, if we could age like you, we'd be super happy. So you don't need a single thing.
So the cells can be isolated. The stem cells can be isolated.
Technically, FDA says you can't. And if FDA is coming down very strongly on these individual practitioners, it's very hard to find, though, because unless they're advertising explicitly online, which a lot of them no longer do, because they know FDA says the point at which you take the fat and you separate the stem cells from the fat, you're changing the integrity of the tissue itself, the fat tissue. So if you're not going from fat to fat and you're doing a step in between, they say that is actually drug production.
Yeah. Wow, interesting. Yeah. What do you think would change that? The FDA? Why is the FDA against something like that?
I don't think that it is their intent was to be like, no, you can't do this. I think what happened was the regulations so there are two buckets in regulation. You can have a cell product can either be defined as a human cell tissue product or it's a drug. There's no in between. So it's one or the other. Mm-hmm. So this bucket, the human cell tissue product, you have to think about is simply like when you get a bone marrow transplant or when you get an organ transplant. Like, what are the rules? If my liver is going to you, like, what are the rules in transporting that correctly, making sure that it doesn't have any bacteria on it? Like, what are the things that are safe practices? So that's what the regulations were written for. So now suddenly you have companies that say, oh, well, we know that we can find stem cells in fat, which was really discovered in 2005, right?
Really? Oh, yeah, my goodness.
We're not even talking about
oh my God.
something that's been known for a long time. These are very recent developments. And so our regulations are written for like organ transplants, and you're trying to squeeze the like stuff this in, and it doesn't make any sense. So that's the problem we have, I think. I started a podcast too, kind of talking about these regulations. And the more you figure out the timeline at which when these regulations were written, you suddenly understand that the intent was not for technologies like this to suddenly come up. And now you have these options. So I think it's high time that we look at these regulations and maybe create new categories.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And are there people doing that? Is there something in place now that is trying to change the regulations?
I don't know. I do think that the discussion, though, is very active. I was just 2 weeks ago, I was invited to meet with our Secretary of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr. He wanted to discuss that himself.
Oh my goodness, because that's what I was thinking. You need to meet with him.
I mean, it was crazy. Norma, you just get
my God.
And say, they would like to discuss. He would like to discuss this with you. It is like never before did I think that that was even a topic.
I'm so excited. I hope you can meet with him again.
Well, we will see. But it is, I think that dialogue first, just talking about what are the issues, how can we adjust? Is there a way to adjust and to start talking about this is a good sign. So I take it as a good sign.
Oh my God, Donna, I'm so excited. I was going to say, maybe you can meet with Art. Oh my God, that's awesome. That's really, really fantastic. So on my continued search for the facelift, there's more information about stem cell. So this one is a little different. So from what I understand, there is a practice of using stem cells from animals like rabbits or sort of that kind of animal, stem cells from their placenta, from a rabbit that's having little rabbits, bunnies, and taking the placenta, and that there's sort of a synergy between humans and rabbits and pigs and other animals that we sort of have medication and things with. And so I was really surprised to hear that this type of thing is taking place in the world, but I've never heard of it before. So this was something I was curious if you've ever heard about.
The Swiss were doing sheep stem cells for a long time.
Right.
They said that the compatibility of sheep to human was very. At the end of the day, we just have to know what the cells are. So that's the practice of characterization, understanding what exactly the cells are. And you can measure this by looking at cell markers or identifying what the cell quality is. So it just has to be an individual we have to look at each product for itself. I get a lot of questions about even aside from animal derived cells, but even human derived stuff like overseas, like you mentioned at the beginning, patients are traveling overseas all the time. They're always asking, what does this clinic do? What does that clinic do? You have to look at the cells and exactly what they're producing. And most of the time you can get your answer in a good C of A, like certificate of analysis, and it'll kind of show all the tests and everything that they do to identify what the cell populations are. Once you can do that, you work your way backwards and kind of look at, well, would this make sense for my skin or for my body? Yeah, I think I always go back to like to like. The closer you can get to what is from you to you is always going to be the safest option. Start there. If for some reason you can't use your own, then it's okay. Well, FDA has all these rules as to how you determine who a safe donor is, and it's not about rejection. The type of stem cells we use actually cannot be rejected,
right?
But you want to make sure that you have a good donor, that it's a safe donor to receive the cells from. Just like that, animals carry around lots of viruses and different things that humans don't. And so there's a whole level of testing that you have to ensure is being done as well. So safety first always, and then look at,
I thought that was very aggressive in an experiment, but it seems to be practiced and used. So I was really surprised, but obviously you've heard of it before too, and you've heard about the sheep and all of that. So currently you're continuing your research and doing all of this. What are you tempted to keep healthy by keeping your little? If I were you, I would just keep putting those stem cells back in. Is this something that that you are tempted to do or can do? Or
Norma, I mean, the answer to that is of course. I think I was one of the first people on the planet to get stem cells back in my 20s when the first generation of this technology, which was developed originally by the South Koreans, they were excellent at cell culture, and they were the first to figure out how to mass culture these cells. And they lined up all the employees, and essentially we just all got cells. And the only reason why we consented to it is because we saw the cells in the microscope. So we knew that these are, and I knew that these are my cells. So literally the only thing that I would feel comfortable putting back in my body, but with zero expectations, because again, at that time, no human had received so many. And intravenous, like giving yourself back through circulation, it doesn't make sense if you have just a few cells or a small amount of cells. That's why, like brain injuries, even to this day, you'll see groups like drilling holes into the head because they have to get the cells exactly.
Yeah.
They only have small amounts.
Right.
But if you have the ability to, mass produce these in the lab, now you can really talk about systemic use, because you're going to lose some in the first pass, because the first pass is your lungs, which is a giant filter. And then it goes into your heart and then circulates the rest of your body. So in order for you to have enough cells to get through the lungs, you need huge populations of cells. And so that's when I received it. And I can tell you, I had autoimmune disease for a long time. I had psoriasis, pretty bad. My torso was what was really affected. And I remember after getting cells, I was about a month had gone by and I wasn't really feeling itchy. So I weaned off of my prednisone and I still wasn't itchy, and it just went on. And Now we know exactly what the mechanism is. And it's the same thing that we see in all autoimmune diseases. And I've never looked back since. And
Wow.
so to your answer, like, okay, we've got a stem cell lab here. Why wouldn't I access this? Well, for the same reason, everyone else, we are all have to comply to the same set of rules.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because we're a fully auditable operation, it's not as simple as saying I would like someone to make me some cells. Now, I did qualify this past year for the Right to Try program because of my back. I actually had a severe degenerative arthritis in my back.
Oh, wow.
And in order to qualify for it, I had to receive multiple steroid injections, which I did in my SI joint and above that. And nothing was helping. I mean, it was debilitating. It was to the point where I thought I'm never going to get out of bed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's tough. At the time, 5-year-old twins, a company, it's just maybe the stress of it. I don't know. Maybe it all just went to my back. But it was so horrible. And after going through all of that, I had to see a doctor and a surgeon, and they finally signed off on me. And so I was able to get stem cells directly into my back, and it's life changing. My God.
Oh my God.
It's been, yeah, I can do what I can do because of that. So it has given
That's great.
Back. Yeah.
And so in that case, instead of it going through your bloodstream, they would directly target, and you would need less to deal with that specific area.
Yeah. And especially in joints, tight joint spaces where blood flow is very limited. I think those are best to be dealt, directly.
Right. And that's not intravenous, or is it?
It's not intravenous. It's directly into.
All right. So that's fascinating. It really is. Wow. It's just, I can't believe the work you're doing, because for me, it's just screaming, this is what medicine is in the future. I mean, it just turns everything upside down. RFK's got to get on this, because this could really be a whole new look at medicine, and I assume be less expensive than a lot of the work that's being done now, and the solving problems for people, quality of life, all of it is just amazing. I mean, just in your own personal experience, just that story is just, it's thrilling. It's beyond thrilling.
Oh,
and this has to happen fast, because I'm going to be 80. I want action.
I mean, to your point, with, one of the reasons why we started this was, I say the medicine has to be safe, effective, and affordable. It's got to be all three, because if it's not affordable, none of this is going to matter, because accessibility is going to be non-existent.
Right.
We're officially living in the stem cell age, because since our last conversation on that, this past December, the very first MSC product got approved by US FDA. Okay, the very first. And this product is for pediatric graft versus host disease. So it's like when you get an organ transplant and your body rejects it, that's graft versus host disease. So this is for little kids with GVHD. And they give them cells, MSCs, and GVHD is dramatically improved. It took this company, I don't know, they've probably been at it for 20 years. It's a company called Mesoblast. They've been at this for forever and finally get approval. And now it costs $200,000 a dose, and you need it 5 times. So it's $1.2 million.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a little over 200,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's about $1 million, give or take. But that is crazy, right? That's crazy. That isn't, that won't really increase accessibility the way we're hoping it is, right? So that's why we have to figure out a way where drug trials are done in a way where the cost isn't so prohibitive, and the only people that can afford to run these trials are big pharma.
Yeah.
Because once that happens, everything gets so expensive. So that'll be the real challenge for our country.
For RFK. For RFK.
Yes, for him. Yes.
Big
job.
Yeah. Hopefully he can spend more time with you and look at this. I have another question. So more and more women are who are having children are taking the stem cells from the placenta and harvesting. Is that still a practice that you think is a valid action that you would recommend?
Norma, I'm so glad you asked this question. We're going to save a lot of people a lot of money. Okay, so when baby is born, cord blood is what is typically banked. Okay, it is very important that people know what is inside cord blood, because cord blood we think of, or they market it as stem cells, but it is a very specific stem cell called a hematopoietic stem cell. Hematopoietic stem cells make only blood. That's the only ability it has, just blood. So if they are telling you, oh, well, these cells can be used for the brain one day for Alzheimer's or anything like that, no, that it's just blood. So if baby grows up to have, let's say, a blood-based disorder and now needs stem cells, well, they can't use their own because their own
has the same
stem
problem.
Cells are making bad blood. So you would need a donor anyway. And even if they could use their own, when you bank that, you can only make one dose. So you still need multiple donors if you're going to actually use the cells to fix the condition. So you see the predicament here.
Wow.
Commercial banking of your own cord blood would result in that. You would eventually probably need to find other donors. So donating cord blood is the best recommendation, I think, that can be made. Other technologies, so these banks are starting to realize the cord blood banking industry, if you look at the statistics, has definitely been affected. They are, and it's because of the use. If you look at the use, remember we talked about, like, why would you bank if you can't use it? The actual usage of cord blood that's been stored is like 0.003%. So that's really low. The chance of you using it is like winning the lottery. So again, donation is probably the best. These companies have adjusted to now offering, everyone wants MSCs, right? Everyone wants mesenchymal stem cells. So we know where to find that. That's in the tissues. So when you're banking the cord blood, for a little added cost, we'll bank the tissue from the cord or the placenta itself, because those have lots of MSCs, which is true. But if you take these things and you stick them in a freezer, then later on when you need a treatment and you remove it from the freezer, most of it is dead. To say that it's actually going to amount to a stem cell therapy is no one would know that. And in the contracts, they say this may not generate an actual product. So this is highly problematic. And we realized this because we were the ones that were asked to make a treatment from these kinds of stored products, and we never could. There are no live cells in there for us to work with. And so if people are interested in banking, we do that. We take the placenta, but we do it the same way we do the fat. We will isolate the MSCs and then we'll mass produce them. It takes us about 2 months to create enough cells to actually survive the deep freeze. But that's what we do for newborns. And those kids will, when they're 80, they'll be using those cells from when they were born. Yeah. My twins were number 2 and 3. And so that technology took us a long time to develop. It was very difficult to develop that, you know. Mm-hmm.
And is that being used commercially?
Well, commercially, people are banking. No child so far has needed them.
Okay.
You know, knock on wood. Yes, no, not needed it so far, but it's ready if they do. And we would be ready to get those implemented. Yeah.
And so what about for people like me who would like to bank my stem cells for use when possible? Like, what do you recommend doing that?
Yes, absolutely. Everyone should bank. I mean, it's a different kind of peace of mind. I'm biased because I work here, but my whole family is banked, including my kids, to my parents, in-laws, everybody. And every employee at Hope Biosciences is banked at their 1-year anniversary. And
I want a job.
It's very important. It's the you know, I people say, is this like an insurance policy? And if you think about insurance, life insurance, you only get paid out if you die. So it's actually death insurance, but that probably doesn't sound so good. But this is truly life insurance. In a way that will give you a peace of mind like none other. Yeah.
I love it. So what would they do? Go to their healthcare provider and say, you want to bank your stem cells and what to do?
No, you just call us up, go to hope.bio, and there's a stem cell banking tab there, and you can sign up right there, and we'll set you up with a plastic surgeon that will take out that tablespoon of fat and send it to us. Everything is pretty streamlined. You can do it from wherever you are. If we don't have a surgeon in your neighborhood, we'll need a little time to locate one. But we get fat.
I love it.
FedExed all the time.
I think I'm going to do that as a birthday gift to myself.
Yes.
I love it. I think that's very cool. And I think it probably is a good idea for most people to think about and actually have as insurance. It is sort of a form of something in your back pocket just in case. The idea of it is really brilliant. So in the future, in sort of the near future, what are you hoping to accomplish? And then in like the magic future, what do you see as transformative?
In the near future, I think within the next 5 years or so, these cells will be available, on the market in some way, shape, or form. I hope it's not expensive. That's the only hope I have, that we are able to keep the cost down. And perhaps it involves like a direct to consumer approach rather than going through the pharmaceutical channels that we know today. So maybe cells are just going to look different, the way it's delivered and the way it's given to patients. These cells can be delivered in the comfort of one's home. We have done that and received FDA authorization to do so in several trials, showing that it's perfectly safe to do that. And so the treatment is, I think, in the short term, going to be approved for something. I think something related to the brain. If I look into my magic crystal ball, in the real future, which I think I'm giving myself some grace and some time, maybe 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. My kids right now are 6, and if by the time they're 30, this is what I picture. By the time they're 30, if they have access to their cells once a year, just like you say, or we'll just say, maintenance, prevention of disease,
right.
And they get it once a year, I believe that that generation at 80 years old is going to look completely different than the 80-year-old that we know today. But you, Norma, are an anomaly. You will stay the anomaly. But I mean, your average, what the diseases, we are afraid of our brains falling apart. We're afraid of our joints falling apart. That world should be a world of the past. Like that should not exist anymore. That is my hope for the future.
That's beautiful. That's really unbelievable. Donna, I just could talk to you when I say I think about you all the time, I am absolutely telling the truth because first of all, I'm so envious because you have the best job. Best job. You really do. I mean, you're doing the magic for everyone's future, and to be in that place, you must be so excited to come to work and to see things evolve and develop. Thank you so much for being a pioneer in this world. And I hope you have RFK's home telephone number so you can call him constantly. I'm gonna reach out to him to say, can you please do something? Because I am so excited about what you're doing and the possibilities of stem cell. You're such an incredible woman, and I'm just so proud to know you. I really am. It's an honor. It's really an honor, Donna. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for giving me this opportunity to connect again. I'm such a fan.
Well, we'll definitely keep in touch. And thanks for the heads up. I can't believe your kids are 6. I think they were 3 the last time we spoke. I remember that they were 3, and you told the story about them using stem cells as maintenance. And I thought that's the dream. That's a dream. I've told so many people that story, and it's a great story. So anyway, you take good care of yourself. I'm glad you're doing well, and keep up the good work. You're really amazing. Thank you so much. We're going to get
you banked, Norma. So next time we talk about the process.
I'm banking. Okay. I will. Okay. Thank you so much. It was really fantastic. Okay. Take care of yourself.
Bye.
Bye-bye.